Hey, my name is Chris Pellegrino. Some of you know me as New York radio DJ Reno. I also work in the PR world for a prominent newswire here in New York City. I also chose to virtually place myself and you on the front line of COVID-19 by speaking to someone who is rather special to me. There are way too many opinions and political propaganda surrounding COVID-19, and I'm merely digging into the trenches that this person has been dug into for the last 3+ months. And her name is Renee Zink. Renee is actually my niece. And Renee and I were talking about her experiences just a few weeks ago, right, Renee?
Yeah.
And Renee is an RN and supervisor of 4 West COVID at Ridgewood Valley Hospital. So that is as front lines as you're going to get in the New York metro area. Renee, you've been a nurse for 10 years, and most of it at Valley Hospital in Ridgewood,
Yeah.
correct?
Yes, all of it.
What was your actual position with COVID-19? And you know, like what was the reason you chose to be on this team? And you chose it, right?
I chose it. I volunteered. So prior to COVID happening, I supervised the orthopedic unit at Valley. And once COVID started to come to the hospital in drips and drabs, there was talk about where we were going to put these patients, how we were going to treat them. And so my manager that I work with on a daily basis, she pretty much said to me, you know, Renee, they're thinking about opening up a unit. I volunteered to go over and manage that unit.
Wait, why would you do that, by the way? Why would you? Because, you know, most people like myself, if I would be like, I'm staying far away. I am not going to be on a COVID team. Like, who does that? Like, who decides that I'm in the front lines of the COVID team and everyone, 100% of the people coming in are COVID positive? Am I correct?
Correct.
Why would you do that? You're putting yourself at risk. You're putting your family at risk. What was your thought process there?
My thought process was, well, if my manager, who I trust wholeheartedly, is going to go, then I'm going to go too. And I felt that no matter what, I was at risk. So the first and only thing I thought about were my kids at home. And I thought that going to a place where I knew that everybody was positive and that I would be selfishly, you know, protected to the best that I could, as well as I wanted to go somewhere where I was going to help. And in the beginning, we didn't know how bad it was going to get or what the situation was going to be. So I thought, listen, if this was going to be the one unit that was going to be COVID positive, I wanted to go and I wanted to help. And so I went, and I knew that I was going to have the team that I needed. So I volunteered and we went together.
How scared were you at the decision?
Terrified. On my drive home after I volunteered, I called my husband and I said, don't hate me, but I volunteered to go. And he said, I knew you would. And that was that. So
What was
never
he?
regretted the decision.
What was he like? Like when you told him that, how did he react?
He was scared, but my husband, you know, Kevin is a good guy and he trusts me and he knew that I was going to go no matter what, because that's the kind of person that I am. And he's kind of the same way. So he said, I trust you. And I know that you're going to do what you need to do. And if you think that this is the smartest, then I'm behind you 100%. So that was it. He was in my corner.
Now, Valley Hospital of Ridgewood, I've spent many a time there through the years. I've lived and grew up in Bergen County, New Jersey, and it's a very relaxed environment. It is a beautiful hospital, and they give you great care there. I can't say enough positive things about that hospital. But what was it like every day in this COVID-19 environment, having to wear, you know, you're wearing suits with masks and shields, and like, can you go to the bathroom in those things? Can you, like, how do you eat? I mean, and when you go home to your families, like, do you spray something? I mean, what do you do to, on a day-to-day basis to navigate through all this? It's different, right?
It was a completely different world. And I'll be totally honest with you. The atmosphere at the hospital was eerily quiet. You know, on the chance that we could walk through the hospital, there wasn't anybody around because visitors were suspended. There was no visitation at all. And then when you did pass people in the hallway, everyone had the same look of fear in them. Everybody was quiet. There was, Valley is a happy place. I was born at Valley. I worked at Valley my entire career. I love the place that I work, and it was a different environment. And when our unit started, they converted what used to be a unit. It's like a pop-up unit. It would close and open as needed. But for the past few years, as long as I can remember, it's been offices. So they converted that. They did a great job. They converted it to a 22-bed unit. It was negative pressure. And every day, we would go and pray that we would have enough PPE, pray that there would be stuff. And we would walk into what we had called an ante room, which was basically just a square opening prior to going into the unit. It was a locked unit. And we would dress head to toe in coveralls, double gloves, N95 mask, shields. And once you walked in, you knew you weren't coming out. It was as if, you couldn't, because we had to spare our PPE. So it wasn't like we could leave, go get a cup of coffee, or come back. There were days that we didn't know if we were going to get a break. We didn't know if we could eat or drink. So we worked most of the days dehydrated, tired, having to go to the bathroom, because for the fear that if you took off your coverall just enough to go to the bathroom, were you going to contaminate yourself, or there were so many different regulations from the CDC talking about the proper use of an N95. And we didn't know, could we take our N95 off to have a sip of water, or was it better to keep it on all day? So it was trial and error, and it was terrifying. But I thank God every day that I had enough PPE. There was never a day that I went to work that I didn't have a mask, or I didn't have the gloves that I needed, or I didn't have protection. We were protected day in and day out. And I'm so thankful for, the staff of Valley for getting us what we needed, and the community. But being in that unit was something that I'll never forget. It was intense, and it was crazy, really.
Was it difficult getting all the equipment you needed at first?
Yeah. So what happened was, I remember vividly, before we opened our unit, I was in charge one weekend at my normal job, which I usually supervise orthopedic unit. And I remember going down to what we call our daily huddle. And that's where supervisors come and we talk about different things. And I walked in on a Saturday, and there was all the administration in the office. And I knew right then and there that this was bad. And I knew that something was happening. And they started talking about how much we had on hand. How many N95s did we have? How many, how much PPE did we have? And the numbers weren't great. And Valley's very transparent. And I looked at my administrators, and I remember thinking to myself, oh my God, this is real. And no matter what, no matter if I had enough PPE or I didn't, I was coming to work, protected or not protected, because that's what I swore I would do as a nurse. And I never looked back, and I would go no matter what. But I remember, again, driving home, where I get the most of my thinking down with loud country music. And I remember thinking, oh my God, like, are we going to have enough? And we did. So it was scary.
Renee, how did your body break down? Did your body break down, being that, like you said, you couldn't go to the bathroom, right? You couldn't really, you weren't sure if you could drink water or not drink water. You weren't sure if you could or couldn't eat. Like, how did your body tolerate all of that?
I was exhausted mentally, physically. I would come home from work and not even want to eat. I was certainly dehydrated almost every single day that I went to work, and by no fault of anybody. It's just the fear. You didn't feel like eating. You didn't know if you could, or if it was the right thing to do. So definitely my body broke down, and just pure exhaustion from it all was, just.
Were you able to sleep at night?
I still have nightmares. It's been 3 or 4 months, and I don't know if I've slept a solid night yet. There's never a day that I don't wake up at least once during the night and think about the things that not only have I've been through, but my coworkers, my friends, patients, their loved ones. I don't go a day or a minute really without thinking about that. So no, I didn't sleep.
Were you infected by the virus? Did you contract COVID-19?
I did. I contracted what I call a silent killer. Right around Easter, at the peak here in the New York tri-state area, I started feeling very sick, but not sick, if that makes sense. I was depressed, tired. I had severe diarrhea. I lost 10 pounds in less than a week, but this was all the time of the peak, So I was upset about not seeing my family. I was upset that I would bring it home to my family. I was traumatized by what I was seeing, what I was going through. So I didn't think it was the virus, so I never got tested. But once it started leveling out and we were able to get our antibody test, I came back positive. And that's when I realized that that must have been it, because I felt that way for about 3 weeks, and then I went back to being myself. So yeah, I did contract it.
As a nurse, I mean, you were a nurse for 10 years. Did you feel personally prepared for all of this? I mean, obviously, we talked about the equipment part of it, but what about you? Did you personally feel prepared to handle something that you've never handled before? You never had to go through in your 10-year span as a nurse?
No, I was not prepared. No, I don't think anybody is. And I think that that's what's so hard about this, is that no matter if you've been a nurse for a minute or 25 years, nobody was prepared for this. It's just because the virus presented in so differently in so many people, and I'm living proof of that. What I had was nothing, and I would don't even like to say that I had it, because it wasn't anything compared to what I saw or what the people around me were suffering. And I think, we did the very best that we could. I mean, I am certainly not a critical care nurse. I'm not, anything like that. I've been med-surg orthopedics my entire career. And I was thrown in there with a group of fantastic med-surg nurses. And the patients that we cared for were critical care level patients most of the time. So it was the blind leading the blind in so many ways. And we were asked to do so many things that we've never thought we would have to experience. But we did it the best we could. And I think that the training and the patience that I have and, my education has prepared me for a lot of things, but did it prepare me for COVID? No, not at all.
Renee, you mentioned that, you guys had plenty of beds, but how do you know who gets a bed and who doesn't get a bed? Take me step by step when that person either walks or gets rolled into your area. What happens? Somebody checks them in, then somebody. I need to get it in my head of what happens day to day.
So there's lots of ways when we were on COVID that people got admitted to us. In the beginning, it was basically we were one of the first units other than the critical care units to open as COVID positive. So in the beginning, we got almost every patient that was COVID until, there was a necessity for more beds. But basically what happened is that you come into the ER, if you get tested positive for COVID, you're either quote unquote stable and don't need an ICU bed. So you would come to us or another COVID unit at that point, where we would take care of you to the best of our ability up until the point where we couldn't provide what you needed. And then at that point, if there were critical care beds and if it required, if it was necessary for you to go to critical care and appropriate, which is a key, then you would be sent to critical care. But many times, patients weren't appropriate for critical care. So we did the best that we could and with what we had to work with. And we didn't run out of beds. Valley was great about having the ability to expand critical care areas. They used areas such as recovery room, same-day medicine. They did the best that they could. So there were enough beds. It was just a matter of who got or who was more appropriate for the critical care beds.
Did you feel everything was well orchestrated, well organized versus, in my mind, I'm thinking, and I'm sure a lot of folks think because they see the news, right? And this is something completely new. It's a pandemic, the whole world is on fire, right? People are thinking in their minds, the hospital must be nuts. The hospital must be, everything must be in disarray. What exactly, was it like that? Or was it more organized and well structured? And
it was organized chaos, if that makes sense. Every day something changed, and that was because the whole world was changing all at once. So you would come in one day and these were the policies and the protocols that were set forward for us, that we followed. You would come in tomorrow and everything was changed. So yes and no, if that makes sense. It was chaos in the sense and that everybody was feeling overwhelmed and we didn't know what was right, what was wrong. So we just followed what we were told. And you know, I was in a locked unit. So when I came to work, my mind shut off to everything around me. I only focused on the 22 patients and my staff. You know, as a supervisor, that's my responsibility, is to ensure that the patients on my unit are being cared for to the best of our ability. So I oversaw all of that, and I saw my team take care of those patients. So was it chaos? Absolutely. But was it controlled chaos? Yes. And it was, you know, the most organized chaos that you could think of.
So well, we had a lot of loss. There was a lot of loss, especially in the New York metro area. But in our family alone, let's see, 7 weeks, I think it was, we lost 5 of our family members. And 3 out of the 5 were to COVID, right? And one they didn't check because he was terminal at that point. Plus, I had close friends who 3 of them passed to COVID. Their dads. And what was it like, you know, dealing with the patients and their families who had no idea? Because everybody seems to have that same story. They had no idea that they were going to pass. They come in, they think they're going to get checked, and they don't realize that that is the last that they're going to see their family, the last time. How did you as a nurse deal with the patient and the families who did have no idea that they were going to pass?
This part of COVID is what I hate the most. This is what keeps me up at night. This is what I question every day, because it's so real, and it's, you know, I feel like the media presents this virus or this disease as something that affects elderly people. And I feel like, as somebody who's not in healthcare, when you think of this, you think of, oh, you know, it's like the flu, you know, and it's just older people. It's not at all. And it's young people, younger than me, older than you, older than my parents age, and it affects everybody. And what was so devastating was that people would come into the hospital with either a mild form or not know that they had it, said goodbye to their family at the doorway, and never saw them again. And there would be days, you know, certain patients stick in my mind, and I know for a fact that they were doing well, and we still question it as a team. You know, what happened? What went wrong? They came in, they struggled, they got better, and then the next day we would come in and they'd be struggling for air, and they would, you know, it's a nightmare. And as a nurse, we did everything we could. You know, they provided our units with plenty of iPads. You know, thank God for modern technology. But these patients, you know, we'd have to go into their rooms and put an iPad in front of them and let them say goodbye to their family. And, you know, half these patients, they were fully aware. They were fully aware that this was going to be the end. They weren't all, you know, none of them really were confused or to the point where they weren't aware at some point. So, you know, our job was to communicate with the families. We held the iPads, but, you know, my team specifically, that's who I'm talking for, we did the best that we could to make sure that we were there, that we can provide them some kind of comfort. We held their hands when we could. But there were days where there was multiple people dying. Like, you would walk in and the alarms were going off constantly, and it was okay, you know, I hate to even say it, but it was like just death after death after death from days. And it wasn't just our unit, it was the whole hospital at that point was seeing this. And there's only so many iPads to go around. And I think, you know, it's just haunting, because these are patients, and it's their brothers, their sisters, their moms, their dads, their grandparents. So, you know, to be a nurse where we strive to help people and we don't like to see people let go, it was at the point where it was almost like we became numb, because so many people were passing in a day, and you had to kind of remove yourself from that. But looking back on it, that was the most heartbreaking part of this whole thing, was the way that people were forced to say goodbye to their families.
What was the average of those who passed from COVID?
What I saw, I mean, I don't want to speak for every hospital or every area, but I would say that they were fairly young. I mean, we saw people that died in their 30s up until 60s, 70s, 80s. So there was a wide range, but I would say majority was most likely probably in their 60s or 70s.
And how long did it take before you realized that there really wasn't any hope for this patient? I mean, how do you know in your gut that this is just, they're just not going to make it? I mean, the what I've heard through all of our loss that we've had, that
Mhm.
they went in, they got diagnosed, they went on respirator, that was it. So how do you, at what point is it that you say this patient's really not going to make it?
You know, it's hard because there were patients that we really thought were going to make it that didn't make it. And then there were patients that we didn't think that were going to make it that made it. But I think, you know, for the patients that I saw that did pass, that didn't get a critical care bed or didn't weren't appropriate for critical care, there's a look in their eyes, and there's a realization that, you know, every patient had. Every patient had the same look and the same desire to just hold on a little bit longer. And I think, you know, after seeing it day after day after day, you just get this instinct and you just get this inside of you that says, this patient's not going to make it. And you, no matter how much they fought or how much their family fought, you know, we could sit back and amongst ourselves and just say, like, this patient's not going to make it. We need to make them comfortable. We need to do everything. And it didn't take long to understand that. It didn't take long before we saw a pattern. And, you know, the nurses that were there, thank God for them, because they held me up just as much as I helped them up. And we had an understanding that, you know, this patient doesn't look good today. Let's do everything we can to make them comfortable because they're not going to make it. So, you know, there were plenty of patients that did make it. I don't want it to make it sound like every patient died, but there was a very large portion of them on our unit that didn't. And we kind of just knew by looking at them that they weren't going to.
Renee, you mentioned a specific patient, and you held her hand through all of it. And I believe her daughter was on the other end of the iPad. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So my kryptonite, I've always called it since I've been a nurse, is that I don't like when people die alone. So from the beginning, even before COVID, if there was ever a patient that's family couldn't make it, I made it my, you know, my mission to be with them, I guess, as they pass. I don't know. But anyway, there was a patient and we had seen her. She was with us for a few weeks at that point, and she was declining, and the family decided to make her a DNR, do not resuscitate, do not intubate. So she was comfort care. And, you know, she was a lovely lady and she spoke with us for days. And anyway, she came to the realization that she didn't want to struggle through this anymore. So we sat with her, and her daughter called on the iPad, and we spoke. And you know, it was myself and two other nurses. And I remember saying to her on the phone, I was sitting next to her, holding her hand, and I said, I will not let your mom die alone. I said, we are here. We are not going to leave her. And her, you know, her mom couldn't speak anymore at that time. And she just looked at her and she said at me and also, and she said, thank you. And I said, I promise you, she will not be alone. And myself and two or three other nurses, we sat with her for almost an hour as she took her last breaths. And this was something I'll never forget. I mean, she's not the only patient that I've held hands. I've held many patients' hand and many in COVID, but I cannot imagine for a second or a minute what that must be like, because not only for her dying, but I can't imagine being on the phone and saying goodbye to my mom or my dad or for you, Uncle Chris, or my husband. And I think that, you know, we as a society don't understand that. We don't, you know, we see it for what it is, but if you're not in it, you don't realize. And that has been one of the hardest things to me, is being able to move on, because, you know, life is short. And I guarantee that when her daughter, the last time she saw her mom, she never thought that she would be saying to her goodbye to her like this. Like I'm talking to you is how she said goodbye to her mom. And it's devastating. And, you know, it's just nurses all around the country, all around the world are doing this on a daily basis. They're still doing it. And that's what's so scary, is that this is not over. You know, what I did 3 months ago is what's going on in other places right now. And I live in fear that every day this is going to happen again. And you know, I think that all nurses and all healthcare providers and everybody who's been through this, no matter if it's a family who said goodbye to their family or a nurse who helped or anybody, we don't want to see this happen again. And it's just, it was definitely one of the hardest moments of my entire life.
Renee, in the 10 years you've been a nurse, have you ever seen anything like this?
No, never.
Yeah.
No.
Has there been these many deaths with the flu or other viruses? I know a lot of folks are saying it's just like the flu. It's the flu. We have more deaths with the flu. We have, I mean, just from your angle as a nurse,
Mhm.
not necessarily just at Ridgewood Valley, but in general, from what you've seen or heard, have you ever seen anything like this?
No. And I will say, I understand in a sense why people say it's like the flu, right? I kind of get it because I am on the inside of healthcare and I understand it. However, if you look at trends, look at data, look at science, it's not like the flu. The difference is when flu season comes, whoever is vaccinated. So that prevents a good amount of people from getting the flu in very severe cases, right? That's the science behind it. The difference is if you look, so our hospital is very transparent in the data that they share with their employees. And there, at the height of our COVID, we had somewhere around 80 deaths in 1 week, all related to one virus. There was a graph that they shared with us that went back to 2019. And back in 2019, in the same week, we only had an average of 15 deaths in that same week of all various disease entities. Okay, so any kind of deaths incorporated, there was maybe 15 back the same week at the height of our pandemic here at the Tri-State. There was almost 80 of one disease. And that doesn't include all the other deaths that occurred at the hospital. This was only counting for COVID deaths.
All right, let me
So
get
if you
this
put
straight.
that into perspective.
All right, let me get this straight. So there were 15, you had about approximately 15 deaths, but there were included a variety of different diseases or viruses, correct? 80,
Correct.
a death rate of 80 in 1 week
Mhm.
from COVID-19 alone.
Correct.
That's a significant
So
increase.
it's very significant. And, I think I don't have a daily rate. I don't, that's not my realm, but from the data that I've seen at Valley specifically, because I can't speak for other hospitals, but that was the difference.
What do you think is attributed to the decline in deaths in the treatment of COVID-19?
I think, I think that we did the right thing here in the tri-state. We locked down very quickly. People were enforced to wear masks and face coverings. We self-isolated. We stayed away from each other, and I think that has played a huge part. I mean, think about it, right? Like if everything kept going, if schools were still open or people were still going out to the mall and not wearing masks, not wearing face coverings, this could have been 10 times, 100 times worse than what we had. So I think we need to still go with that. I think, if we look at science and we look at data and we see, how we can protect ourselves from staying 6 feet apart, from wearing our masks, from getting tested, all these things that we've done has helped significantly. And I'm a firm believer in that. I think that we did the best we could at the time and we're following guidelines. We're seeing it now. We're seeing it on the West Coast, these states that 3 months ago didn't believe that, over here we were seeing this, or maybe they thought it was just a New York metro area thing. They're seeing it now because they didn't put in the precautions right away or they didn't follow them and they lifted them very early. And now their rates of transmission and positive tests are way higher than where we are right now. So I think we acted quick and I think we need to keep going with that. Does everybody like it? No way. I hate it. I mean, I want to see you. I want to see my family. I want to be able to go to the beach and all these things, but I also am not selfish. And I think that that's a huge part. We need to do our part so that we can protect each other. And the whole world needs to do that at this point.
Yeah. You notice that there are some hospitals that had more cases than others. And then there were hospitals, as you've kind of mentioned, in Midwest, Southwest, out in the Pacific Coast, and so on, that are outside the New York metro area that didn't have it the way we had it. But now we're seeing Arizona and parts of California and in Florida and Texas and others. Now I know again, I'm totally staying away from all this political propaganda, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But in your heart, being as a nurse, and as you have gone through this, and still kind of going through, right? You're at the tail end of, hopefully, tail end.
Hmm. Yeah.
In your heart of hearts, had those states, cities, and whatnot have done, and you've said it, have done what we did, what is your thought? I mean,
I think, I think if everybody would have shut down at the same time, I think we would have seen a lot less people being infected. And definitely, I don't think we would be where we are right now in the other states. Um, but I'll tell you one thing, if I didn't watch the news, which I hardly ever did, but let's just say there was no news or no media. If I went to work every day in the same situation, I would not think any different. I would not be saying, oh, it's not that bad, or it was bad and it's still very bad. And I don't need the news to tell me that it's bad because I lived it. And, I just hope that the other states or the other countries or the whole world can all just come together to get this thing under control. Because if we don't, and we don't wear our mask, and we don't, social distance, and we don't, do all these things that we're supposed to be doing, it's going to be way out of control for a very long time.
prepare for this in the future. I mean, there was no preparing for this. All right, even though they were reports coming down in dribs and drabs, but now that we know what we know, how do we prepare for this for the future?
I think we have to just be vigilant. I think we have to ensure that, it's simple things like when you're coughing, you're covering your mouth, you're washing your hands, that, the kids are protected, that if you're feeling sick, you don't go out, or even if you're not, like, we need to get tested for this. But in hospitals, I know, hospitals need to have plans. Like, where are they going to get PPE from? Do we have enough PPE on hand? Like, where are we at with this? And I think, are we prepared for the next wave? I hope so. I mean, I hope that we learned enough to say, you know what, if and when it comes back, this is how we're going to do it. I just think the biggest thing is we all need to do this together. This is not about one person or one political side or one state versus another state. This is a whole world thing. So I hope we're prepared. I know that I'm not ready to go out, to the malls or do any of that, and I'm keeping my family as protected as I can. But we all need to do the same thing. We all kind of need to be on the same page. There's no way to be prepared for this again if we don't do that. And if without a vaccine, chances of it happening again are, pretty likely, in my opinion.
What have you talked about your experience? You have the two sons. I think you have a 5-year-old and a 7. He just turned 5. And
Yep.
What do you tell them? What do you tell them about your experience and what you've learned?
So my kids I'm very honest with my kids. I always have been. They've known that mommy's a nurse and mommy helps people. And when this started, I remember saying to them, that there's a bad virus going on and mommy has to go to work and I have to help the people. And I know that I would come home every day after working and they'd see me, I told them, don't come near me, let me come, my husband would bring me a towel in the garage. I'd strip in the garage and I would walk up the stairs in my towel. And, my little guy, Hunter, he's only 5 and he'd want to run up to me and give me a great big hug because he always has. And I'd have to say, no, stay back. And so that was hard, but they, thank God that they understand as much as they can. And, I just tell them, they always ask me, Hunter always asks me, did you take care of patients today? He always says that to me. And I'll have to say, yes, Hunter, mommy did take care of patients today. And, I tell them, my husband was always so good and tried to tell them, mommy's a hero. She takes care of patients and she helped people today. So I think in terms of that, they kind of understood a little bit. But as the virus goes, I just told them, we have to be careful. We have to wear our masks. We have to wash our hands. You can't go near, for a long time, I couldn't go near grandparents or they didn't see Nana and Papa for a long time. We waved to them from our balcony. So I don't want to scare them, but I want them to understand. And I don't want to, baby them in any sense because I am very honest with them. But I think just letting them know that how important it is to stay clean and to stay safe. And they've been good about it for the most part.
Renee, what are you going to tell your grandchildren? Like when you have grandchildren one day, what are you going to tell them about COVID-19 or about this coronavirus that was out in 2020? And what do you tell them?
I tell them it was crazy and that I was, in the middle of it and I'm proud to have been in the middle of it. and that I would do it all over again if I could. But I would tell them too that like life is too short, you know, and that's one of the things that I learned the most about this. And that grudges are just a waste, you know, and I want them to know that when science tells you things, to listen, you know, but to be thankful for every single day that you get. You know, I always said things could be worse. And when I was going through this, I remember just praying to God and just saying, like, get me through another day, you know, so I can tell my kids these things and tell them that, you know, we have to believe that and that there are brighter days. So I would tell my grandkids, you know, when you think things are so bad and things could not get any worse, they could. And I've lived that now, and I've seen what happens when things hit rock bottom, you know. And I hope that brighter days come for us and for them. And I hope that the world, when I have grandkids, God willing, you know, that things are different. And you know, but I want them to know that we have to help each other, and it's so important to be there for one another and do everything we can to help. So I guess that's what I would tell them. You know, I don't know, but I hope that someday they ask me about it. And that's what
So Renee, I would venture, well, I would have to say, Renee, that while going through all this, you're a nurse on the front lines of COVID-19, and your days are just like a whirlwind, right? When you hear folks talking about, oh, this is just a hoax, this is just the media playing this up, this is not real. I mean, did you get angry, or what was in your head when you're hearing this from people?
You know, I don't really get angry. I'm not an angry person, but I do get sad. And I think that, you know, COVID-19 came like a ball of fire, and it set the whole world into a blaze, and it set healthcare into a blaze. And for the people who believe it's a hoax, what you're doing is you're minimizing not only my efforts, and it's not anything about me, but every single person who has tried to save a life during this COVID, and every single person who's lost a family member or has struggled, who has been intubated and came back, or, you know, you're minimizing that. And it's not a hoax, and you are selfish for thinking that. And I think that spend a day, walk a day or an hour where I walked or where all the nurses have been walking, and then tell me it's a hoax. It's not. And and it's a shame that people think that this is political and that this is a scam. And I'm telling you, live with what I'm living with every day. And then tell me that it's not real, because it's 100% real, and it's happening all over the world. So it's sad that people think that, this is not a serious thing.
You mentioned that you learned a lot from all this. You've learned that to take one day at a time. You've learned that love of family and all the important things in the world are the things that should come to surface, and forget all the little things. Do you have any final thoughts? Something you would like to tell the world about your experience?
I guess, I would just want to say, first, I want to just say a huge thank you to everybody who did wear the mask and did social distance and did take it seriously, because I don't think people realize how important that was. And I know how important it was, because it enabled me, to take care of a amount of patient load that we could handle. And, also, I guess I just want people to understand that this is not something that's going to go away very quickly. And it's something that's very serious. And a lot of people's lives are changed in so many ways. I believe truly that everything happens for a reason, and that, things could always be worse. I don't know. There was a time during this that I didn't think things could get worse. But then, they do, and they get better, and there's always a light at the end of the tunnel and all those things. I guess I just want people to understand that we have a long way to go. And if we don't come together and do what we're supposed to do, it's all going to happen again. And who knows? I mean, 6 months down the line, I don't know what life's going to be like. I just hope and pray every minute that my family, my friends, their family, their friends, and so on and so forth never get affected by this, because it's a nightmare. And I guess I just want people to take it seriously. That's.
Well, Renee, I appreciate the time to to share your experience as the RN and supervisor of the COVID team at Ridgewood Valley Hospital in New Jersey. I know you've had a rough few months, and I do appreciate this. I think we all really needed to hear what it was like on the front lines from someone yourself, and I do appreciate that. So thank you,
Thank you.
and give the kids a hug for me.
I will. All right. Love you. Bye.
Love you too. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye. You're
Bye.
welcome.